Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Parent Solution. We're happy to have you all here again listening, and we're definitely pumped for today's episode. If you remember from our last podcast, we were talking about what felt like much more radical solutions to managing the different learning styles within a typical public classroom. Jamie and I discussed at length some very practical ways to take your child's learning into your own hands. And today we are so excited to have with us a very special guest. This extraordinary lady is a parent and a mother who has implemented a lot of what we would like to call common sense solutions to the challenges that she knew her children were facing in the classroom. Stephanie, welcome. We are happy to have you.
Hi, thank you for having me.
It's an incredible honor to have you with us here today, Stephanie. And as a parent who is consciously participating in what we like to say is alternative education, we definitely have some questions for you. And we know our listeners are eager and intrigued to hear from someone who is actually putting practical steps into place. So why don't we get started with you telling us a little bit about yourself?
I don't really know where to start besides I'm a mom. I have two boys. I have an 11-year-old and an 8-year-old, and they were in public school up until this school year. And I just dove into the homeschooling side of things just because I saw how much my kids were struggling with everything going on in the school system and being part of the public education system and everything going on with COVID and everything like that. And so I just decided that my kids' mental health was more important than anything else, and I am surrounded by people who currently and have been for years homeschooling, and that gave me the confidence to do this for my kids and to take this route because just how much stress and anxiety my kids were under the past 2 years, just in general, like, the hustle and bustle of like getting up in the morning, getting them going. They start off their day with, so much tenseness and anxiety, and then they're going to school, and then they come home, and it's just a full day packed of just so much going on. So, I just saw how that was impacting my kids and just decided we're going to slow down, we're going to take it easy, and we're going to just go with the flow, and they're so much happier now.
That's really awesome.
Anything else you guys want to know? Or just about me personally?
Yeah, I mean, tell us a little bit about, maybe it's a good idea. You mentioned, you took your kids out of school, for many factors, obviously, but one of which is the constant hustle and bustle and go, go, go. I definitely see that a lot in the regular world. Or what you might term the quote unquote regular world of schooling and of parents of the work and the constant drive and go, and it doesn't stop, it doesn't slow down. So with you taking an alternative approach to schooling, what does a typical day, whether that's with what you do for work or what your kids do for school, what does a typical day look like for you and your kids?
Generally, I just let them kind of start their day on their own. Like, I don't have a time that they wake up. Sometimes I try to get them up earlier, but they generally wake up on their own. Not like it used to be where they're up at like 6:30 in the morning and getting ready and everything like that. So they get rested and they get the amount of sleep that they need because kids go through growth spurts, right? And so sometimes they're not fully rested and, kids need their sleep. So we just take it really slow, really easy in the morning. They get up at their own pace. They have breakfast, depending on what they want to eat. And we just kind of ease into the day. They have times where they can be on technology and things like that. And I encourage them to always go outside every day, which is so good for the development. But yeah, we just take it easy, take it day by day, basically. That's how we do it.
Mm-hmm. So I was going to ask you, like, on the note of a typical day, how do you manage everything? You seem like you are much more relaxed, which I love. You seem like you're much more relaxed than the what you might term the average parent when it comes to the regiment that you provide for your kids. It definitely sounds more natural. It sounds much more holistic. Personally, I think that's a great approach to children because they're under a lot of stress as is with growth spurts and growing, and they don't necessarily understand everything that's going on. How do you manage everything with, I assume they're doing some sort of education throughout the day. How do you manage like them and their school and your work and family life? You must be superwoman, right?
No, not superwoman. Some days we do like worksheets and reading and stuff, and some days we just kind of just take a break from that because sometimes they can still get overwhelmed and they're kids. They're still under a lot of other things that are going on, and we don't have like a set schedule for anything that we do specifically besides they do math club every Monday, alternating Mondays, and then they have the classes with you. That's the structure that we stick with.
Right.
And then throughout the day, they're constantly learning. So they're involved in everything we do at home, like the cooking and the cleaning. They do, like, we have conversations. We listen to podcasts together. We read books and just throughout the day, like their whole day is learning all day. It's just not like traditional or conventional learning they would have in a classroom, right? So it's through everything we do at home, and then we have conversations about all kinds of things. Like yesterday, we so that whole convoy coming through Canada,
yes.
I explained to them what's going on with that, and then so my 11-year-old, he's like, well, what do you mean? So, like, well, they're going from Vancouver all the way to Ottawa, and he's like, oh, what's going on with that? So we pulled up the map of Canada, and I showed them where they started, where all their stops were going to be, and how far across the whole country of Canada we're going. So the conversation turned into like a geography lesson, a social studies lesson, and a math lesson, all in one, just in that conversation. So those are the conversations that we're having every day, and that's the interaction that we're having, like, just in our family. And all the time, like summertime, we'll have I have my own garden, and we have conversations about worms and plants and how they grow and sunlight and photosynthesis, all those things. And so that's really the unschooling part of homeschooling, because everything we do is our kids are learning. So that's how we do it at home here.
I love it.
Oh, Stephanie, absolutely love it. And so many things, being a mom myself, and I'm assuming a lot of our listeners are too, right from the beginning when you started to talk about the hustle and bustle in the morning and, the kids needing sleep and their mental health and all that stuff, like that spoke directly to me. I live in about an hour and a bit away from my work. And so I had to get my kids up that much earlier than the quote unquote normal child that would get up for school, and, rush them off to daycare or before and after school, and then commute my way to work, and get there on time, late every day. Let's be transparent. And then drive all the way back, in time to get my kids, to come back to spend that 2 hours with them at the end of the day, by the time you get the dinner and stuff ready for the next day and bath and in bed, and you're doing it all again tomorrow. So I'm loving how you recognized all of that and spoke to that for sure.
Up until in May of last year, I worked nights for 2 years. And that was hard, especially on my kids, especially in the summertime. Like, my youngest would have meltdowns sometimes. Well, I don't want to say meltdowns. He would have very hard time with me leaving at night just because he knew I wasn't in the next room. And that was really hard for him, and it was so hard for me. And not just because I was leaving, but I would be working at night, and then I come home in the morning, and then they're off to school, and then I would spend a few hours with them, and then I'd be getting ready for work again, and all those kinds of things, and that just added an extra layer of stress onto all of us. Mm-hmm. It just made things so much harder, and right now we're just easing into the homeschooling, and we're just finding our groove, and my kids are so much happier, and they get to go play with their friends, and they get to go play outside, and they get to just, like, their level of happiness is, like, so much higher. And because they get to have me at home with them, it's just, I wouldn't do it any way differently. I just don't, I wish I did it sooner, honestly.
Yes. I love it.
And, like, we do, like, so I've always been really in tune with my kids and aware of what's going on with them. And I've also worked in, so the night shift job that I had was for, I worked at a women's domestic violence shelter. So I saw what happened with kids in such extremes of, like, in and out of school, all those things back and forth, and just the things that can happen. And I just really, really, really wanted my kids to have that just level equilibrium and just calmness. And I feel like we're finding that now. So
that's I love it, and I love how in tune you are with the kids. That's a huge step, and a great thing to be able to say that you are, right? And I think that goes back to the hustle and bustle. A lot of parents miss that, right? Because they're so busy doing other stuff, you know, hustling off to work, coming home from work, doing all the things that need to be done, that we sometimes forget to check in with our kids. You know, sometimes we forget to kind of step back and to make sure that they're okay. And I don't think that's no fault of a parent or no fault of a guardian. I think it's just the way sometimes, you know, our society has brought in all these factors that we have to keep in as a parent, and to raise a healthy family, and to be able to provide with them at the same time. I think I love how you incorporated all of the different learning experiences throughout the day as well with your kids. You know, you talked about how, you know, the convoy going through, and you took that on as a huge learning opportunity, and the cooking and, you know, the planting of the worms and stuff. Do you ever get the feeling, or have you ever thought, you know, through this whole process, that your kids might kind of fall, quote unquote, behind of their learning by not attending the traditional learning environment?
Yeah, that's, you know, obviously that would be something that is a worry, but also we're conditioned to think that they need to be, like, in this box, right? But kids don't learn in a box. Kids learn through experience, through interaction. Like, I have friends who are educators, and so we have these conversations also about how kids learn just by doing, by being present, by having conversations, and just by adults, like, seeing them, like, and being, like, getting down to the level, like, hey, you know, having the conversation about, you know, how plants grow, and just being present with kids. And just the way kids learn is it's not a structure. They learn through experience, they learn through doing, they learn through interacting and building. And, like, my kids love Legos, and they have this massive box of Legos, and they just create something different every single day, and they'll use up the whole box of Legos. So that's their creativity. That's how kids learn. They don't learn in a box. They're not meant to sit in a desk for however many hours a day with three breaks of playing outside or whatever. That's not how kids are. Mm-hmm. Kids need activity. Kids need, like, just to be kids.
Yes. The kinesthetic learning, especially for kids. You mentioned, I know you have 2 boys, and for boys especially, they need that hands-on stuff. They have to be able to get up and do something. You're right. I love it. Awesome.
I know you touched a bit about this already, Stephanie, but if you have anything that you want to add, I'm still a bit curious of what you incorporate and how do you incorporate education and learning opportunities to provide them with education and the learning opportunities that people may think that they're not getting in a traditional setting. And do you incorporate the traditional education at all?
I don't really. Well, I do. Like, we'll do math worksheets, we'll do reading, we'll do YouTube videos of science, and like, coming in this spring when it's nicer outside, we're gonna do a lot more outdoor, like, science experiments and just exploring those kinds of things. But right now it's more just stuff we could do inside, which is more reading, more writing. But it's not super structured. It's, like I said, again, those conversations and just through the interaction with each other that we're doing it. And like, when I met with my homeschooling representative, I had that conversation about, because I had really high anxiety about, like, they might fall behind, and they're like, what is the structure, and what are these, like, I need all these tools, I need all these things. And she's like, just take a deep breath and it's going to be okay. The first year is you learn how to learn, or you learn how to be where your kids are at. It's not trying to have them at the specific bar, pushing them to where you think they need to be. It's meeting your kids where they're at and going with their strengths. And then as you go through this, you are going to learn how to work with them and how to fill in any quote-unquote gaps or where else they may need support. But for she really eased my anxiety about how not about thinking about, oh, my kids are going to be behind and all those things. She just said, this is the structure we're going to follow, structure, loose, and we're going to try and meet these milestones, but also don't stress over it, because they will get there, because kids learn at different rates, different paces. And so, just take it easy, don't stress yourself out, and do what you can do, because everything is a learning opportunity. Like, we had a whole it was about 3 hours conversation, and we documented a whole bunch of things that she's like, even like the travel that we do, even the adventures that we go on, those are all learning experiences. And the way she explained it to me is, when we went into it, we discussed like all the things that they're learning. I was like, okay, that's where they're learning this quote-unquote structured stuff that they would learn in school. They're learning it through experience, not in a school setting. So that's what really took a load off of me, thinking that my kids would be behind, and they're not. They're just, I'm meeting them where they're at, and that's what they need.
I love it. Perfect.
Because they're learning, but they're learning the same material, but in a different way. Instead of it being in a traditional educational setting, or educational institution, rather, with a public school or a private school or whatever, what have you, in an actual physical building, you've taken those academic lessons like math and reading and writing, and you've worked those types of things into the lifestyle, into a much more holistic learning style. I love it. It's great.
Yeah, and they're learning without learning. Like, so if you, like, I know, Jamie, you have kids, yeah?
Yes.
So, like, they're learning in a way that they don't know that they're learning. And then we have these conversations, and then they come back to what they learned a couple weeks ago. Like, especially my older one. He will be like, well, but Mom, when we did this, and when you said this, and And so we talk about it. And that's how they learn through the experience, but they don't realize that they're learning, and that pressure of the classroom and the school and being in the building is off of them. It's just, I feel like it flows easier.
Yeah, because the expectations, the official expectations and learning goals and the paperwork and the administration is just not there. It's gone. And I love it. I love it, honestly, because that's how children really do perform better, is by not having those expectations that are forced upon them and like you said, fitting them into a box. That doesn't work for everyone. And it doesn't work for every child. And I would argue it doesn't work effectively really for any child, but that's, that's a whole other conversation. On the note of expectations and beliefs and things like that, perhaps this is a little late coming into the conversation, but I feel that it's important that I ask, do you have, Stephanie, certain beliefs or situational factors that prompted you to make the decisions that you've made this year, particularly when it comes to your kids' educational experiences?
For sure. So I believe it was January 7th, 2021, and my 7-year-old had a total breakdown. Like, he sat on my lap for about 3 hours and cried about everything going on in the world. Like, he's like, Mom, are we gonna die? Mom, why do we have to wear masks? Mom, I can't, like, school is so hard. And honestly, before like the total bubbling up of everything, and he just having this emotional moment, he would come home after school and just cry. He would cry for about an hour, and I'd sit with him and we'd talk it out. And I reached my limit of what I was allowing to happen to my kids in the school system. And so and then again this year I was like, on the way home so we went to the States in June, and my brother got married, and on the way back we had the conversation of, okay, do you guys want to go back to school, because the school's literally just down the street from our house, or do you guys want to be homeschooled? And so we talked about it, and then they decided, okay, we want to be homeschooled. Okay. And another thing that really made me decide that was they put in the mask mandate at the school from preschool, or from preschool to 12th grade, and I was like, no. And then the social distancing, the isolation, like, I worked, so when everything happened in March 2020, I had a conversation with some of my coworkers, and my first gut instinct was, this is going to be traumatic for our kids. Our kids are going to suffer. And it didn't take long for the cracks to start to show. And we pushed through it, and then I got to the point where I was like, nope, this is enough. We're not going to do this. My children need to be at home, and they need to be in a place where they are not so heavily influenced by all the other garbage outside of, plus the anxiety of like, oh, you're gonna go home and kill your grandma. Like, that's what my 7-year-old asked me, Mama, are we gonna die? Are we gonna have somebody else die because we're not doing this? Like, like, putting our kids under that amount of stress. And we know that, like, when kids are in a situation of trauma, they don't learn.
Yes.
They don't advance. They're not able to bring in new information. And so, I was not gonna let them go through that. Not another year.
I think
so. That just what prompted me to.
Yeah, to do something. I think that is so admirable, that you chose to do that, that you recognize, hey, this is a problem, and you're right. As an educator myself, I will absolutely agree with you, that yeah, children don't learn when they're in a state of trauma. And I love what you said. They cannot accept any new information. Their brain is just literally like reacting in a trauma response. It shuts down and it's unable to take in any new information. And that is why the, you called it garbage. I like to call it programming. That's why the programming is so strong, right? Like is when you think about all of the mainstream narrative about, like you said, killing grandma and needing to wear masks or you're gonna, it's your social responsibility, and all of that traumatic stress on top of the educational expectations. I think you were absolutely right to pull them out of school. And I'm sure that is not easy for you some days to manage everything. You can say you're not Superwoman. I have a different opinion of all moms that keep their kids home, because trying to do that and work and everything else, but you've recognized that that's what your children need. And it is so admirable that you've chosen to make that decision, that no matter what, my kid's mental health is more important than anything else that might be going on.
Yeah. And I've always been aware of how important mental health is, ever since I had a traumatic upbringing, and so my mom did a lot of work with us to recognize all the things that go into trauma, and there's a whole other conversation we could have about that, but I'm very aware of how trauma affects the brain and the body, and I am a huge proponent or supporter rather of physical exercise, nutrition, and taking care of yourself, body, mind, and soul. So those things being at the top of my list pushed me further into deciding to take my kids out of school. And I was involved in the public school system for a long time. I was part of PAC and school council and just super involved in the school and everything. And bureaucracy is slow, especially in the school system. And what our kids actually need in the school system, it doesn't exist. Every year it continues to be removed, which makes no sense, because this is our next generations that are going to be making the decisions in this world, and that's unacceptable to me as a parent. And it should be unacceptable to every parent, as much as they can handle. But I wasn't gonna. To me, that's unacceptable.
You weren't going to stand for it. I love it.
Oh, for sure not.
Stephanie, you did briefly mention, a little bit about having the conversation with your kids before you decided to make this transition. How did they, and I mean, I think we know the answer, but just maybe a little bit more insight of how that conversation went, maybe to help other parents give advice of making this transition if they're thinking for next fall. But, what did the conversation look like? Were they upset by it? And being kind of in this process of homeschooling since the fall, has their emotions changed about it? Are they happy about it? Do they miss being in school? What are those feelings and emotions around that for your kids?
Sometimes they miss their friends. Well, not sometimes. They say they miss their school friends, but a lot of their school friends also live here in town, so they still see them. But that conversation, the way it went, is we actually had it previously in 2021. We've talked about it. I guess 2020-2021 school year. We talked about it, and they're like, they weren't really sure. And then again in the fall before fall we had that conversation, and they said, well, actually, yeah, we could try it out. And I'm like, and if you guys don't like it, I could send you guys back to school. That's fine. They're like, okay. My kids, they're super easygoing, and they were like, okay, well, let's try it. They're really just kind of down for anything. And as we had the conversation, they got more and more like, okay, yeah, this could be a good thing, and we just kind of came to the conclusion, and I let them come to the conclusion themselves, like, if this is what you guys want to do, we'll do it. We'll figure out a way. I know my older son kind of had a little bit of anxiety about not being in school and not seeing his friends, and we had the conversation of, you can still go visit your friends, hang out with them however you want, and then they're like, okay, let's do this, and they were set. They were okay with homeschooling and everything that comes with it. And honestly, right now, compared to last year, I would say their emotional health has improved a lot, and just they're happier at home. And just, I think it was about 2 weeks ago, we had a conversation. I asked them, I was like, so how do you guys feel about being at home? Do you guys want to go back to school? They're like, no, we don't want to go back to school. We want to stay homeschooling. This is better. I asked them the question and they gave me the feedback. I was like, okay, this is what we're gonna do, and they love it. They enjoy it.
I love how you gave them the option right from the beginning, right? And you said we can, try it out. But hey, if it doesn't work for us, or if this isn't the right solution, we can always go back or try something else. I love how you get, and still continue, you check in with them and say, hey, is this still working for you guys? Or, you want to make some changes. I think that is so important of evolving kids in a situation like this, right? Even though as parents, we feel a certain way or we believe a certain thing, but if we were to pull them out from school, if it's something that they desperately don't want to do, or not meeting their needs at home, well, then that could be a recipe for disaster on the flip side of things, right? So I think it's important that and so key that you kept your kids involved in the decision making of that.
Well, and for me, I do my work online with online fitness coaching, and then I also do massage therapy in the evenings when my husband's home with the kids, and then I can go and I do a couple of appointments a few days a week. So for me as an adult, I can change my schedule. Mm-hmm. I can be flexible because that's just, I'm able to do that. And with them, I felt like it was really important to, how, well, for me, growing up, there was always that you do what your parents say, you don't question, you just follow what I tell you, and none of that back and forth conversation. I didn't want that for my kids. I wanted to give them the opportunity to tell me no. But have the conversation. Okay, why is this a no?
Yeah, and have a discussion.
Have the dialogue. Open dialogue, right? Mm-hmm. And so that they're not seeing just a small piece of what is going on. We have the full conversation, and they're involved in the decisions that affect their lives. There's still things where mom and dad are like, no, this is what's happening. But when it comes to chores and it comes right. to respect and responsibility and time management, those things are non-negotiables. But other things that they need to learn and have the say in what happens with them, we have those conversations. And it's for me as a parent, having those conversations is very important.
I think that's awesome. I do think that when you give children a definite structure as to what it is that they can choose, and what it is that they have the responsibility of doing for themselves, they'll surprise you in terms of what they choose, because oftentimes they want to choose the thing that seems best for them, and that's the thing that seems better for them to be learning and growing. And if you do your job as a parent right, you have you'll be surprised. Your kids will choose what you're wanting them to choose in the first place, but you've given them that option. So like you said, it's learning without them even realizing that it's learning.
Growing up, I was like, oh, this is horrible. I just want to go play. But, we had responsibilities. Looking back now, I see that helped me in ways that I didn't even realize. And I want my kids to have a little bit more experience with doing more things not in the school structure and just being kids.
I love it. I love it. Wow. What a phenomenal conversation. Very insightful. I definitely learned a lot and gave me lots of things to definitely think about moving on in the future. And I specifically like, Stephanie, when you mentioned meeting them where they're at, right, with their learning, and not to have to always reach for that bar that's given, but start the education, start the process, start the learning where they're at, and go from there, and taking in everything of the environment, everything that's around them, and providing them with the learning opportunities every day, and Kimberly and I briefly talked about that in our last podcast too, of there's so many things that we do throughout our day that could be incorporated into a learning experience. So I love that you mentioned that too, and kind of backed up what we were talking about last week. So that was beautiful. We cannot thank you enough for joining us here on The Parent Solution today. Your insights and wisdom have definitely given me, as I said, a ton of things to think about. So I graciously thank you for that. And thank you so much for listening. We appreciate all of you. And remember, new episodes will be premiering every Tuesday at 5 a.m. Eastern on Spreaker. This is The Parent Solution. Remember, this is your one-stop shop for counseling, insights, and all things educational.